Welcome to Doing Stuff with Darren. I'm Darren. Let's do stuff. Today, we're going to make snack sticks, and we're going to do it using some equipment that I've modified myself. We'll see if it works. Spoiler alert, some of it does and some of it doesn't. Well, let's get into it. We're going to start by measuring out the ingredients. I'll put the recipe in grams per kilogram in the comments section of this video. I use this scale for measuring the spices because it measures down to 1/10 of a gram. I use a pint-sized to-go container as a bowl and zero the scale to that. I'm going to go through these ingredients pretty fast. Like I said, the measurements will be in the comments. Salt, then pepper, then whole mustard seed, red pepper flakes, garlic powder, then cure number 1. Careful you don't confuse this with cure number 2, they're different. Also, the amount of this stuff you use needs to be pretty exact, so this is really the reason you need a good scale. Next, paprika, then cayenne pepper, then corn syrup solids, onion powder, ground mustard, white peppercorns, fennel seed, anise seed. I'm going to grind the white pepper, fennel, and anise in a spice grinder before I add them in. Lastly, we have non-fat dry milk powder. This is high heat non-fat dry milk, not to be confused with low heat non-fat dry milk. You have to get this from a sausage supply place. Now it's time for the meat. I have about 2.6 kilograms of chuck and 3.1 kilograms of boneless pork shoulder. I would have done a 50-50 mix, but this is what I had in my freezer, so that's the proportions I'm going to use. I'm going to slice the chuck into strips that will fit into my grinder. Now I'm going to slice the pork shoulder into strips as well. Here is all of the meat together in a bin. I'm going to grind all of this together in my limb grinder through the small plate. I've had all of the metal components of the grinder in the freezer while I was measuring the spices, so they're super cold. A very important part of making sausage, and I really can't stress this enough, is you have to keep everything very cold. If your meat warms up while you're doing this, you're going to end up with fat smearing, which is a fancy term for everything is going to turn to mush and your sausage isn't going to have the right consistency. So I'm going to grind all of this meat through the small plate, and I'm going to put it in the freezer for a bit to chill it some more. It's hard to tell from the video, but this meat is now almost freezing again. I'm going to run it again through the small plate. Since I'm doing snack sticks, I don't really want big chunks of meat or fat in the sausage. I want it to be fairly homogeneous. Not quite emulsified like a hot dog, but definitely less chunky than, say, a summer sausage. Once that's done, it goes back in the freezer to chill again. I'm going to be adding water to this while I'm mixing the meat. So rather than just use tap water, what I like to do is make a slurry with ice in a blender and then use that when I'm mixing. Again, it's all about keeping the meat cold throughout this whole process. We're going to slow down here a little bit because now I'm going to start using equipment that I've modified, and that's one of the points of this video. First up is my sausage mixer. This is a 20-pound mixer I got from Academy a number of years ago. It used to have a handle so I could crank it by hand, but it's a terrible design because when you use the handle, the mixer isn't high enough, so you keep hitting the countertop with the handle. So you have to move it to the side of the counter so you can crank it, and then you're holding the mixer with one hand while you're cranking with the other, and the whole thing isn't very stable and you're worried it's going to fall off the counter while you're doing it. It's just about easier to do it by hand at that point. So I decided to put a motor on it. This is a windshield wiper motor and some parts I designed and 3D printed. I have a whole video on how to make this thing on my channel. It's a long-winded video because I'm still learning how to do this whole video thing, but I show you step by step how to make it. You might want to check that video out. I'm going to put the meat into this thing, and while it's mixing, I'm going to be adding in the spices. Yay, it works! This is actually kind of a proud moment for me since this is the first time I've actually tried it out. I'm going to keep adding in the spices and non-fat dry milk powder, and I'm going to add water until it looks right. I didn't keep track of the water like I should have, so I can't tell you how much I added. Maybe next time I will. One of the really nice things about this mixer mod is that it goes forward and backwards, so you don't end up with any dead spots in the tub that don't get mixed. I don't have a nicer mixer that attaches to my grinder, so I don't know if those go both directions or not. Those things are so expensive. That's why I made this one. Maybe someone can enlighten me in the comments if those things go forward and reverse. I mixed it very thoroughly. Again, I'm making snack sticks here, so I want it fairly homogeneous. The total mixing time was right at 6 minutes. And now my fingers aren't freezing. So the mixer was a resounding success. Check out the video and make one yourself. Not gonna lie, getting the meat out of the mixer was not super easy. Next time I'm just going to disassemble it from the start and dump it. This time, I tried scooping the meat out by hand until I gave up and took it apart, as you can see here. I decided it was still too dry, so I added some water and mixed it by hand until it felt right to me. That is one problem with using a mixer. You don't really get a good feel for the meat like you do when you hand mix it. The mixer was definitely a win. Now it's time to get out the stuffer. I've modified this as well. This is a 15-pound manual Haka stuffer, and I've stuck a windshield wiper motor on it because the last time I made snack sticks it was impossible to crank the stuffer handle with one hand while I stuffed 17mm casings with the other. It was at that point that I decided I was going to motorize all of my equipment. So as you can see, I've 3D printed some parts and wired a foot pedal onto the stuffer. It's the same motor I used on the mixer. The speed controller is just a basic one off of Amazon. I figured that motor would be strong enough to run the stuffer as well. I'm using a 10mm horn I ordered from Haka, and I'm using 17mm bearded butcher casings I got from Academy. And now we're into the excruciating part of this snack stick journey. This took forever. The motor I'm using is definitely not powerful enough to push the meat out through that little bitty horn. It was basically at its stall point the entire time and could just barely get the job done. I'm going to have to play this video at about 2000 speed to make it look any semblance of normal. I don't know how long exactly it took to stuff the 12 pounds of meat because I ended up turning the camera off, but here's a shot of the stuffer going full speed to show you how slow it was. I even had to take a break after about 6 pounds, and I put the stuffer in the fridge while I let the motor cool down. It's definitely going to be back to the drawing board for the stuffer to get that thing sorted out. But I did get it all done, so here's a shot of the finished snack sticks. I'm going to put them in the fridge for 24 hours and smoke them tomorrow. Alright, it's been 24 hours, so now it's time to turn this fridge into a smoker. I took a working fridge and I added vents and a cold smoke generator so I could use it to cold smoke bacon. When I want to hot smoke things like sausage, I close off the vents for the chiller unit and I use a space heater to heat up the inside of the fridge. I'm hanging the snack sticks on some of my bacon hangers. Probably some of them are touching in there, and I know people say not to have any of them touching, but I haven't found that to be much of a problem. Here's the space heater I use to heat this thing up. It's sitting on a pan and I have another pan on top of it so that grease doesn't drip down into it. I have taken all the internal controls out of this thing so when it's hooked up to electricity and the knob is turned to heat, it's blowing hot air. It doesn't have a temperature sensor inside of it anymore, nor does it have a high temp shutoff switch or a floor pressure switch, so it's about the least safe space heater you can get. Don't put this in your house. Unfortunately, you can't really see the LCD screen in the video very well, but what I'm doing is setting the smoker to what I call temperature delta mode. What I mean by that is that the smoker will monitor the temperature of its meat probe that I'm going to stick in one of the sausages, and it will keep the internal smoker temperature a certain number of degrees higher than the meat. I'm setting it to stay 30 degrees hotter than the sausage, and this is all user programmable. Theoretically then, I should see a nice even cooking curve since the smoker will just gradually get hotter as the sausage gets hotter. That's not exactly what happened, as I'll show you later, but that was the idea. Now it's time to light the smoke generator. I made this out of 4-inch furnace exhaust pipe. It's filled with wood pellets down to a stainless screen that's inside of there. The fan blows through a small tube inside of a larger one, and that acts as a venturi to suck smoke out of the tube and blow it into the smoker. I have all the materials to make one of these out of stainless. I'm going to make a video on how to do that at some point in the future, so stay tuned. Anyway, I light it with this torch and it's going to keep blowing smoke into this smoker for the entire cook. You can see that smoke generator makes a lot of smoke. I decided to go ahead and hook up a laptop to the smoker so I can log the cook. Here you can see the Arduino controller I have running the smoker. I'm going to make a video series on how to make an Arduino smoker controller, so you might want to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss it. Now we start running into another problem. It seems like the meat has just stalled at about 92 degrees. It's been there for about 2 hours. So I decided to turn the smoker temperature differential from 30 degrees to 45 degrees. So that worked, and now the meat is cooking again, but once again it stalled out, this time at about 141. I decided to call it at 143. The sausages have been at that temperature for so long that I know they're safe to eat. Let's take a look at this temperature log for this cook. As you can see, they heat up nicely for the first hour and a half, and then they just plateau. I let them sit at that plateau for 2.5 hours and they just didn't move, so I bumped up the temperature differential to 45. You can see they started heating up again and kept increasing in temperature for the next 2.5 hours, but then they plateaued again and really wouldn't get any hotter than 143. I'm not sure what the issue is here. One possible explanation would be a probe problem, but both probes seem to be working fine at the start of this. I think it's a placement issue with a pit probe. I think it's reading a temperature in a hot spot of the smoker, so the meat is actually seeing a lower temperature than the smoker probe is. The next time I do this, which will be as soon as I figure out a better way to run that stuffer, I'm going to place the smoker temperature probe in the midst of all the sausages and see if that helps. Hopefully it will be something simple like that. We'll see. Anyway, the sausages are now cooked, so I converted the smoker back to fridge mode and I let them hang in the fridge for a day. After a day, I take them inside and cut them to length. I'm not selling these things, so I just guess at the length. They're all a little different, but I'm not going to stress about that too much. All right, this is one of my favorite devices. This is a Vacmaster VP230. I love this thing. I had a little food saver vacuum. This thing is so much better than that. There you go, I'll put a little, it wasn't really a food saver, it was some random food saver type thing. All right, watch this, we're gonna put this in. I have it set to 30 seconds of vacuum. And that is it. That is a perfectly vacuum sealed package. This thing is absolutely amazing. I would highly recommend getting one of these things. All right, we're gonna do all the rest of the packages. I'll finish this video letting you watch me stuff the casings in real time. Man, that part was horrible. But I'll tell you, these snack sticks turned out really nice. They're pretty spicy, so I'm probably gonna cut down the red pepper flakes and cut out the cayenne next time. Here's a little teaser video of what's next for the stuffer. I'm going to get that finished up and get that video done here hopefully pretty soon. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If so, do me a favor and hit those like and subscribe buttons. I'm interested to hear your comments, so put those down in the comments section so I can hear what you think about this. I'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your day.